it.
Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
With the second pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Von Miller, linebacker, Texas A&M.
He's the greatest ever, huh?
And then I just wanted
When you got all the advantages.
Welcome to the Aggie War Pod, a product of Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast network. I am your co-host, Mike Craven, senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. The other voice you'll hear on this podcast is a barbecue-eating machine who won't shy away from a road trip or an off-key rendition of Creed. The former fighting Texas Aggie defensive lineman arrived in College Station as a three-star prospect in 2013. He now resides in Houston, but his heart never left. Ladies, gentlemen, reveille, I present the one, the only, Jay Arnold.
Thank you, as always, for that wonderful introduction, Mike. This is it's crazy. It feels like this season has flown by, and now we're into the silly season portion of the year, with coaching changes and transfer portal news and playoffs and all kinds of announcements that don't pertain to actual on-field content. But it's been a crazy year. I'm sure you've been extremely busy these past few weeks with all the stuff happening around the state of Texas. But you know, it's kind of bittersweet, right? As one chapter ends, you know, we get to the end of the 4-team playoff. 12 teams coming in next year. I mean, there's just a ton to talk about, isn't there?
It's amazing that college football tries to have its off season in the season. It's just great. You know, like you don't get any, like while the season is going, there's coaching changes going on. The portal opened up on Monday. Staffs are being filled. And then there'll be another round of this come end of December, early January, as position coaches start kind of getting replaced and leaving for better jobs or getting coordinator spots. And so the first round of the coaching carousel tends to be kind of head coaches and lower level staffers. And then as it moves on, the coordinators and stuff start moving around. That's kind of shout out to A&M for kind of getting it done and dusted by the time the portal came around. And that's why they did it. That's why they fired Jimbo early. That's why they tried to get a replacement in there the day after the regular season ended. It's because this has hit the ground running. You don't have until February to figure this out. You don't have. You know, I heard coaches, I mean, Sonny Dykes talked to me about this last year when we were building the magazine. You used to get to campus and you didn't have to worry about your roster. You would get the job in December, maybe early January, and then you'd recruit until the National Signing Day in February. And then you would worry about your roster in a real way going into spring practice. But now with the transfer portal and with the early signing period, like you don't have that kind of time and luxury. And we're starting to see the clock sped up. Texas A&M, the perfect example of that. In this episode, we will kind of break it up into downs like we normally do. First down will be coaching stuff, just kind of cleaning house on the Elko thing and looking at what the potential staff could end up, you know, looking like as this goes on. Starting to hear a couple of names. One name's pretty much official. Second quarter, we'll talk some transfer portal. You know, there's a couple big names in the portal. We'll look at, you know, who are the priorities to keep, what are the positions of need. Third down, we'll do bowl game stuff. There is one more football game in this football season. We'll talk a little bit about the Texas Bowl against Oklahoma State, and then in the fourth quarter, we will talk Ask Jay. On the Eyes on Texas, we do quarters. On this one, we do downs, and it's like really messing me up. I think I've flipped downs and quarters a few times here. But in the fourth section of this show, we'll do Ask Jay. Just some thoughts from what we got online, and then, you know, college football playoff stuff. Want to get Jay's opinion on the Florida State thing. So we'll end the show with that. Before we get going here, please rate, subscribe, give us a 5-star, tell a friend, share it on social media, all the stuff that it takes to grow a podcast. Our sponsor right now is Home Field Apparel. If you'd like to become a sponsor, please let one of us know. At Home Field Apparel, you can use promo code WHOOP, WHOOP, and get 15% off of your first order. With Christmas coming up. That would be a great gift for your favorite Aggies in your life. You can just go shop at one place, get everybody a t-shirt or a bomber jacket. I want a bomber jacket. I need to figure out what school I want to get a bomber jacket of. UTSA is not on the Home Field Apparel list of schools that they have stuff on, so I'd have to choose a secondary one there. that is the first part of the show. Jay, let's get into it. Coaching stuff and first down. The biggest news so far, outside of Mike Elko's hiring, which we talked about when that happened in our previous podcast, Elijah Robinson, everybody's favorite Texas A&M assistant coach, leaving to become the Syracuse defensive coordinator. This almost feels like the perfect split. Mike Elko coming in, probably wanting a lot of new faces. A lot of times you don't want the friendliest face in the room to stay because you want guys to become loyal to you, not to loyal who they are. I have an uncle who is a regional manager at a big store we would all recognize, and the first thing he does is fire the most liked person and the most hated person when he takes over a store, right? You fire the most hated person because you're trying to curry favor. You fire the most liked person. That way they don't keep going to that gal or dude instead of you the whole time, right? It feels like Mike Elko was going to have to keep Elijah Robinson for obvious reasons, but Syracuse taking him as a DC is good for E-Rob. He gets to be a defensive coordinator for the first time, and I think it's ultimately good for Mike Elko and his staff to just clean slate it. Let's bring in our guys. Let's start this thing over and not have loyalties kind of split between old staff, new staff, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's I think that's definitely something to consider. My thought was that with Elijah Robinson already having some familiarity with Mike Elko and having coached on the same staff as him, maybe it would be easier there. But everything that you said made sense. And for Elijah Robinson, I mean, it's tough to get those opportunities without moving, right? Like everybody that I've talked to in the coaching industry pretty much has said the same thing, where it's tough to just move up within a job or within a program. In order to advance up the coaching ladder, you're gonna have to make some changes. And in this case, E-Rob's a Northeast guy, right? He's a New Jersey. He went to Penn State. Syracuse, I think, is like 3-4 hours away, so he's not far from home. And he's going to coach with a guy that he's known for a long time, and Fred Brown too. So it's kind of a perfect storm of factors for Elijah Robinson to try to make that jump and become a defensive play caller and try to advance up the rungs of the coaching ladder, as it were.
To be clear, I'm not saying that there would have been purposeful strife between E-Rob and Mike Elko or any type of conscious, like, hey, it's just a subconscious thing when you're a player who got recruited by E-Rob, loves E-Rob, and they're going to bring in a new defensive coordinator. It wasn't going to be Elijah Robinson, most likely at A&M as the defense coordinator. If it was, he'd still be at A&M, right? But they were probably going to bring in a defense coordinator. Now you got the defensive coordinator that's got to kind of figure out who's in charge and letting the players know who's in. There's some headaches there that could pop up. Maybe that would have never come to fruition. But I do think it's something that happens in managing leading worlds. And so I don't see it as that huge of a deal. Florida defensive line coach Sean Spencer, tabbed as the replacement, was at Penn State before, has done an excellent job with defensive lines. Florida's best defensive lineman was from Manor in Texas, so used to recruiting in the state of Texas as well. Any thoughts there on replacing him or replacing Elijah with Coach Spencer and kind of what that's going to do for the defense?
Yeah, and Coach Spencer is also another guy that spent some time at Penn State. Guy he had developed up there by the name of Micah Parsons ended up being pretty good.
Yeah, he's solid at football. He probably has a future.
So I mean, obviously I didn't want to see E-Rob go, but talking to people that I've known around circles in Florida and Penn State and other stops that Sean Spencer has made along the way, this seems like a very good replacement as far as filling in both as a developer of talent and as a recruiter. Sean Spencer ticks both of those boxes. I also love the nickname Coach Chaos. I think that's a great moniker for a defensive line coach. So looking forward to seeing what Sean Spencer is able to do in Aggie land.
SEC background, obviously coaching at Florida, so not going to be surprised by anything he sees there in the Southeast. Is it interesting? I think this is happening more and more. Is it odd that some of these assistants are being rumored or announced before we know who the coordinators are going to be? Like Mike Elko's, we'll talk. Derek Miller's being rumored as the next general manager. Adam Cushing, offensive line, who's coming over from Duke. I can't say his last name. Artesidi? How do you say his last name? Do you know?
We'll just go with Coach Ish.
Yeah,
works,
Coach
right?
Itch. Coach Itch. I need to do some more research here. Defensive backs coach. Is it interesting to you? Some of those names are obviously familiar Duke guys to Mike Elko. But is it weird or different to hire some of those guys before you have a coordinator in place?
Uh, it is and it isn't. And you're right, because like you'd think that a coordinator would want to bring in his own guys, and so maybe you leave some of those positions open. But at the same time, I mean, if you're a head coach, you want to bring some of the guys, reward some of the guys that have been loyal to you, bring them along. Uh, and I mean, there's just so many different variables to think of that we don't even get into on the show, like families and people wanting to stay in certain spots, or people wanting to get back, or recruiting ties, specific high schools that they may know, or just so many different things that could go into selecting position coaches. I usually think of getting the coordinators first and then building the staff around those coordinators, because those coordinators are going to be working closely with the position coaches
Right.
more so than the head coach anyway. But I think in this scenario too, part of it is there's some pressure to make some big hires at the coordinator positions too.
Yeah.
And
you may have to wait on those guys.
Yeah, you may have to wait on guys that are, coaching in various levels of competition still in the postseason to make announcements. So we'll see. I think there's definitely some names out there that people want to see targeted. I don't know that A&M is going to necessarily be able to pull these guys, if Elko's going to be able to pull these guys, but there are definitely some names to keep your eye on.
Coach Ish's last name is spelled Aristide. So anybody listening to this podcast, I mean, I can look this up afterwards. We're just recording, so I can't stop and look this up. I should have looked it up beforehand, but there's a lot of stuff going on here around the state of Texas right now. Just didn't quite get to pronunciation of the rumored defensive back coach, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, we need the pronunciation guides at all times.
I tried to look at Duke's site while you were talking, and it gave me no help. So I'm going to have to go find an interview or something like that about it and listen to him. Let's get into the coordinator stuff. That's kind of the next big thing for Aggie fans. The assistant coaching stuff is important. Strength and conditioning, obviously, what that's going to look like. The general manager with Derek Miller, I think, is a big piece of news that we can dig into if we would like to. But what are your thoughts on let's start with the defense, because that's Elko's side of the ball. Do you think he just brings in Santucci back, or do you think he goes outside of that tree, kind of knowing some of the feelings that maybe still exist on at least A&M Twitter and message board life?
Yeah, I don't think you can read too much into the message boards and the Twitter about Santucci.
Mark Stoops would disagree.
Yeah. The vocal people, I guess. You have local yokels and you have vocal yokels.
That's
and,
right. That's right.
A&M has plenty of both. But no, I mean, I think part of it is there may be a little bit of recruiting questions about Santucci just from his time at A&M. I think the players that I talked to that played for him liked him.
I've never met somebody who didn't like Tyler. I mean, I hadn't heard a player ever say that. I hadn't heard a recruit say that, to be fair. I've heard it on message boards, but I actually haven't heard it from the recruit. I don't know of any Anthony Hill quote that is well, I'm not going there because of Tyler Santucci or whatever. That was more message board stuff than reality from what I know.
Yeah. And people want to jump to conclusions about things like that. And that's why I'm I think people that are worried about Elko bringing Santucci along are a little bit overblown. But if I'm Tyler Santucci, maybe I don't want to go with some people that over analyze and jump to conclusions that aren't true. With that being said, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Santucci ends up coming along. I just think that these coordinators hires they're going to try to get some names in. I think that's just going to be what A&M kind of wants, and something that's probably been communicated to Elko. It's there's again, this goes back to the problems with alignment. Maybe it would be better to just let the head coach do all of this on his own, but I think there's going to be some pressure from outside the coaching circles to get certain guys in. So it may be that a guy like Santucci, because of these message board opinions that shouldn't matter in the long run. It may be that a guy like Santucci is lower down on the list of some of the people influential within the program outside of coaching. So maybe it's a deal where A&M doesn't get the first guy and they circle back. But man, it's just, there's so many names out there that it's tough to predict exactly what path Elko is going to take with building the staff.
Is it hard for a defensive-minded coach to hire a defensive coordinator? Like, if you're one of those big-name defensive guys, do you want, kind of like how Jimbo with offensive coordinators, maybe not in the exact same vein, but you're hiring more of an assistant to the assistant manager, right? You know, like whatever that is on the office, you know, more so than just a guy. Like, the offensive guy is going to have more autonomy because Mike Elko isn't an offensive genius who has done it correctly before over and over and knows better. Right. I mean, I wonder if the defensive side will have a smaller name, quote unquote, than the offensive guy, because can you go out and get a Joe Rossi from Minnesota or whatever if you're not going to just completely turn over the defense to him?
Yeah. And it's it's kind of a similar deal to Dave Aranda at Baylor, right? Where it can be tougher. Whatever side of the ball that you're on, you're going to want to implement your own principles.
Yeah, and you should. That's why you got hired. That's why you got hired. You should. Yeah.
Yeah, it's go with what you know, right? Well, whatever brought you to the dance is what you're going to stick to. And then the other side of the ball is where you kind of give more free reign. Obviously, as a head coach, you're going to have some influence on both sides, game planning and whatnot. But yeah, I think it's definitely harder for a defensive coach to go in and give up what is his baby, right? Like, that is, you have,
he's going to peek into that room a little bit more often, you know, like, what do y'all do? What are y'all doing? You know, I would do this on third down. You know, have you ever thought about that on second and long? Like, that's going to happen more than on the offensive side of the ball.
Exactly. And so it's one thing I think a defensive coordinator or any coordinator likes to have a little bit more freedom. So that can maybe, like, to your point, make it a little more difficult to get a defensive coordinator to come in knowing that, you know, Elko is going to be probably a little bit more involved with the game planning and the play calling side of things on the defensive side of the ball. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity for a coordinator to learn. Because the thing about the coaching business in general is just there's so much exchange of ideas. And principles and little tweaks that maybe you didn't think of before that you can learn. So yes, like you want to have that autonomy, but at the same time, you also want to learn as much as you can on the job. And I think learning from one of the better defensive minds in the game, and Mike Elko is also an opportunity that would appeal to some of those names. So it's a catch-22, double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Saban figured it out, you know, how to have some defensive guys come in there. And to your point, they knew having success in a Nick Saban style defense was going to help them be better coaches, but also put them on a platform to go get a head coaching job. And so that is a good point there. I'm going to throw some names out of like guys who I would kick the can on. I already said one. I think Joe Rossi at Minnesota is one of the best defensive minds in the country. I would absolutely call him, you know, A&M's a better job than Minnesota. Morgan Scalley at Utah, I would call every Utah assistant coach of all time. I would call Kyle Whittingham. You know what I mean? Like, I would call everybody associated with Utah. I'll bring them back up when we get to the offensive side of the ball here in a little bit. Tony Gibson at North Carolina State, also a really good one where you think you could probably go poach and hire one. And then off the board here that I don't think anybody's going to mention too much, Scott Simons at SMU. Has done an incredible job. He was at Liberty before, SMU now for 2 years. SMU's defense has been putrid since like the 80s, really. Like, they have never been good at defense. They were top 20 defense in the nation this year, and it really helped them go win a conference championship last week against Tulane with their backup quarterback. Like, that defense has been outstanding. He also kind of bases out of the same type of stuff that Elko has, a younger guy who, to your point, may do the 2 or 3 mentorship years and then go get a head coaching job. So those are some of the names that I would look at. Brian Brown at Cincinnati is another one. So should be plenty of young, exciting defensive coordinator guys that Mike Elko can kind of hook up with, partner with, and try to blend both philosophies together into one.
Yeah, Simons is a name that I was actually going to bring up because I was kind of excited about what he did at SMU this year. Obviously, me being originally from the Metroplex, SMU was kind of a program that I always keep an eye on. I used to get dragged to like FCA functions there every once in a while, and like you said, SMU for as long as the program has been back from the death penalty has always been more of an offensive style program. I mean, June Jones, Sonny Dykes, like these are all offensive guys, and
Chad
Brett Lashley is
Morris.
an offensive guy too. So what Simons has been able to do there in at the Hilltop is impressive in my opinion. And I got burnt on that a bit this year because I expected SMU to be typical SMU, score a ton of points and give up a ton of points, and that wasn't the case for the Mustangs. The defense won them a lot of games this year, and as the game continues to be more spread principled, it's also just kind of the offenses that you're going to face is it's a good indicator there for what he's done at SMU. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see the approach that Mike Elko takes here.
I believe turning it to the offensive side of the ball here, this is where I think they go big swing, right? I mean, they don't need a big time defensive coordinator. They have one. His name is Mike Elko. He's the head football coach. He's getting paid $6 million a year. You go big swing on the offensive side. You get a pseudo assistant for Elko, in my opinion, like like you get him a partner in crime on the defensive side of the ball. You get a gunslinger on the offensive side of the ball that can just be a hired gun that you pay $2 million a year to be one of the best coordinators in the game. Who are a few names that maybe pop out to you on that side of the ball just initially here? And we're not reporting anything. We're just playing fantasy general manager, what we would do if we were looking at some guys.
Yeah, obviously Will Stein, I think, is the first name that would pop up for anybody. Sean Lewis was a big one before he took the head coaching job at San Diego State. I think he'll be really successful there. You just kind of look around and see what's available. You guys, Dave Campbell's published a piece on the Incarnate Word staff. Obviously that place has been putting out a lot of talented coaches recently. As an off the cuff name, Connor McQueen there as the offensive coordinator at Incarnate Word. Obviously, I don't think they're going to go to that level, but me as an A&M guy who played with McQueen and Kenny Hill and those guys in College Station, McQueen's been under a lot of good names. He's been an assistant under Lincoln Riley. He's been an assistant under Chip Kelly. So that he has some a wealth of knowledge, we'll say, when it comes to being an OC, and now he's OC at Incarnate Word, who continues to be an offensive powerhouse. So it's there's lots of names out there. Again, probably not realistic on that last one, or getting Will Stein out of Oregon is going to be tough, but there's no shortage of offensive brilliance out there to try to tap for the Aggies.
Kevin Johns is the offensive coordinator at Duke, and he was under Mike Elko, so that's a name just to monitor there, just because of the familiarity. Brennan Marion at UNLV is one I would consider. He's been at Texas before. He obviously knows the lay of the land, would be great on the recruiting trail. Kids absolutely love him. He's young. He was an absolutely monster receiver at Tulsa. If you want to go watch some highlights, he has his own little offense with the go-go offense. It's very fun. Uses athletes a lot. Like I think the Aggies would like that one. He was in on the UNLV job, probably second place there to Scotty Walden from Austin Peay, who ended up getting it. So, I think Marion's one to watch. Remember, he's who replaced Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino was at UNLV for a cup of coffee, came over to Texas A&M. Well, they hired Brennan Marion, and we're much better off for that. UNLV makes the Mountain West Conference Championship. I think he's one to watch. You mentioned Will Stein. Andy Ludwig at Utah is another one. Just a power, just like, I think that type of offense works for a Mike Elko type dude. Like Elko would love that type of offense. It would be complementary. Warren Ruggiero at Wake Forest. Like, I don't know, like I'm kind of an RPO nerd, and he runs it in a way that like nobody else runs it. And so
I hate the claw fence so much. Just the extra long
the slow mesh
point.
slow mesh RPO.
So much.
Dude,
but
it
as a
works.
defensive lineman, it's probably a good sign. Right?
It works. I mean, the last 3 quarterbacks of Wake Forest has been the best rated in the ACC. Is EPA is always top 20. Like that thing works. Yes, that's another good point. If you don't like it, I think it bolsters my opinion. That is a good that is a good offense because you just find it annoying. And so, like, if you find it annoying, then that is good. Tim Cramsey from Memphis. He's got some Texas ties. He was at Sam Houston for a little while. I got one for you. What about Alex Atkins at Florida State?
Yeah, that'd be another good one. I thought you were going to say Brian Ferentz there for a second.
No, not Brian Ferentz. Alex Atkins at Florida State. And here would be my pitch to him. Hey, you're not in a real conference, bro. You know, like, they don't consider y'all real. Like, they look at you like the American and the Mountain West and Conference USA. Come to one of the only 2 conferences that apparently matter. We'll talk about this in the fourth quarter. This is me being very upset right now. Coming to one of the 2 conferences that matter, you probably get a little bit of a pay bump. I think he's one there. What are your thoughts on Phil Longo?
I don't have too many thoughts on Phil Longo.
Yeah, I think he stinks. I wouldn't go Phil Longo, but he's another name that I heard as well. Phil's not bad. He just hasn't changed his philosophy when everybody else in the air raid will tell you that stuff doesn't really work anymore unless you do it a little bit differently. And he refuses.
Well, and Elko talked about adaptability being a big part of what they want to do on offense. So that's why I think maybe one of the younger, fresher minds is going to be the call on that front.
Yeah, Will Stein, I think, would be my first call. I do think Brennan Marion would be number 2, and then we'd move on from there. Is how
maybe Dana Holgerson. I mean, he's going to be looking for a job. No, I don't think Dana Holgerson is looking for a job. I think he is looking for the next blackjack table or craps table that can get him on a heater. I think he is looking for an empty spot at the bar. I think Dana Holgerson is about to have an epic 2024, and it does not involve calling plays anywhere. Yeah, he's over at the Golden Nugget in Lake Charles right now.
Now that boy's in Cabo. He's in Cabo right now. He is not in the country. He has used his passport to go somewhere. I don't want to break news on the website, but he is not in America. I can tell you that. I can tell you that with pretty much certainty. So that dude, yeah. Anyway, I love Dana. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we no longer have him in the state. I get why Houston fired him, but like just from a selfish personal reason, Holgerson cracks me up.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are any other names you got for the coordinator stuff? Just get that out there. That way, in a couple of weeks, when one of the 50 people we list is right, we can go, hey, look at that. We had this. Like, people do that. So
yeah, I don't have any off the top of my head, unfortunately, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Just not my area of expertise. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see just kind of what route A&M goes there.
Do you have a style of play you want?
See, like you brought up like the physicality of Utah and their offense and what they do. I really think that Elko's going to want to go with a more exciting offense based on what he said at the press conference. I think he's going to go more towards like a like you said at Brennan Marion, like a go like innovative offense, spread principles, throw the ball around a little bit, try to get your athletes in space. I think that's going to be more the direction that Elko goes, but who knows? I mean, again, this is dealing with unknowns. There's a lot of questions. What's the Kansas offensive coordinator's name?
I think he just got a new job though.
At Penn State.
Yeah,
that's right. Never mind. I mean, again, this is the coaching carousel. Trying to keep track of everything is it's a bit chaotic.
Call Colin Klein, just kind of ram a battering ram into everybody.
I don't know if I want to do that with Wegman.
Yeah, no, not with Wegman. I do wonder. That's the other part of all this kind of stuff is like in 2023 with the transfer portal and more player empowerment and NIL. How much does your current roster and specifically your current quarterback play into decisions like this in a way that maybe it didn't in 1994?
I think it plays a big role. I think
I do too.
I can't pinpoint the exact example, but I remember a head coach talking about bringing in an offensive coordinator and the quarterback sitting in on interviews with it. There was an example of that in college football. I can't remember for the life of me exactly who it was. But yeah, especially with an elite quarterback really being able to will a team to victory, maybe on a level that isn't as prevalent at higher levels of football like the NFL. I think you're really going to want your quarterback. If you believe in that guy, you're going to want to get him involved in the decision on what offense coordinator you're going to hire.
Before we move into transfer portal stuff, Derek Miller, rumored general manager, also would be following Mike Elo over from Duke. How important is that job in today's world?
Well, it's very important because I'll tell you, we didn't have general managers when I was playing just 10 short years ago. So it's just with all of the recruiting and multitude of factors that are present now that maybe weren't present previously. The general manager is a huge position. From guys I've talked to, I mean, it is just a massive role, a lot of responsibility and undertaking that gets things done. It's, you talk about levels of organization within a program and how important it is to be organized on all fronts, from game planning, recruiting, and everything. A general manager is going to be a guy that makes a lot of that stuff go. It's not the same as like a general manager in a NFL or a baseball sense, but there are some similarities there that, when a team is struggling, as far as just the organizational aspects, you can trace that back to the general manager. So having that guy in place is very important, and especially with a guy in Derek Miller that has SEC experience. He was an SEC at LSU. He was a player personnel guy. So there's some key factors there that go into being a successful general manager at the college level.
So far, that's Elko's best move. Getting Derek Miller locked up, getting him in there, making that role important from the jump. Like, we're bringing in, because with the port, they're your first line of defense in the portal. For your own team, they can be kind of big brother a little bit on what's out there and what's not out there, and kind of give some guys some truth bombs on what the grass would look like on the other side. But also, they're kind of the first filter of, let's find the guys who fit our style. Let's find the guys who fit our profile of player. Let's eliminate all that other noise. And here's the 10 guys at running back to really look at coach blank, instead of like, here's 80 dudes in the portal, figure out which ones you like. Like, they're the filter. They're the sifter there for a lot of that kind of stuff. Alex Brown at SMU is a big reason why the Mustangs have turned it around there. And so I do think that is one to kind of give some flowers to. Like, that's an important one. I think that's going to be big for this first roster, especially like having him right away, kind of ground running, getting into the portal is going to be big. Let's move to second down in the transfer portal. Max Johnson jumped in. Looks like he's headed towards North Carolina. Walter Nolan, the biggest name so far. We'll talk about him specifically in a second. Jordan Gilbert, the safety who missed most of this year with injury, is in there. A few offensive linemen, which you always expect when a position coach is gone. Jordan Moka, Remington Strickland, James Bailey, young wide receiver Raymond Cottrell, also in the portal. Let's talk about Max Johnson first before we get into Walter Nolan. Big loss, small loss, really no loss with Jalen Henderson being there and Connor Wegman hopefully coming back.
I still think it's a loss just from the experience standpoint. And I think Max Johnson was a great, reliable backup. I do think that loss is mitigated a little bit by what Henderson was able to do in the past 2 weeks of the season. Theoretically with Wegman also coming back healthy, and the other thing too is just there's so much in the portal from a quarterback standpoint. Obviously Ohio State, Kyle McCord entering the portal is wild to me. Gabriel from OU is in the portal. So from a Max Johnson standpoint, like, I would have loved to keep him as kind of that experienced guy in the quarterback room, and a reliable backup in case guys go down. But I think he made the right move for him, and I think that A&M will be able to mitigate that loss between Wegman and Jalen Henderson.
Riley Leonard's out there.
He is. I think he ends up at Notre Dame, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean,
Will Rogers is out there.
Are we for sure Connor Wegman's coming back? Or do you think that depends on the offensive coordinator hire?
I think it does depend on the offensive coordinator hire. I am kind of basing it right off Connor Wegman coming back. I'm basing my response to Max Johnson leaving on Connor Wegman coming back, but I do think that the offensive coordinator that Elko's likely to bring in, I think, will lean himself more towards a Wegman style offense and simplifying that and developing him. So we'll see. But I do think Wegman will be back at A&M.
You can disagree with this statement if you want to. I think it's harder to find an elite quarterback than an elite coordinator. And so you hold on to the elite quarterback and you find a coordinator that can work with them rather than bringing in an elite coordinator and going find a quarterback. Because that's a lot. I mean, I know in the portal it's a little bit easier to do, but a lot of this is recycled trash, right? Like there's a reason that they're not going in the NFL or whatever, like they're just average quarterbacks. Like Wegman's a potential future NFL type player. You bring in somebody who knows from day one that's who you're working with. Like that would be my opinion on it.
Yeah, and I think Wegman showed that potential this year. So I agree with you wholeheartedly that it is more difficult to find an elite quarterback, especially at the college level, than it is to bring in an elite offensive coordinator.
There's a reason that quarterbacks get paid a lot more in the NFL than coordinators do. Like it's scarcity. There's just not that many of them. And in college, that's even especially true at that level, at least. Walter Nolan going into the transfer portal. He has left the door open reportedly to A&M kind of being still in the mix. Do you see this as the future of college athletics where you're basically in the portal officially or unofficially every single year because you're making it known that like you're open for business, bub. Like if anybody wants to come and splash some money or give me this offer or look at a different like I think most of these star players are essentially in the portal every single year, even if they don't officially enter it yet.
Yeah, no, like and that's another thing that I've talked to coaches about is just you're constantly recruiting now more than ever, just because of the transfer portal. The other thing too is with Walter Nolan, I mean, obviously you lose your position coach.
Right. Sure.
Elijah Robinson. So that's just another piece of that puzzle. But, if you're recruiting at a high level and getting guys, you're going to get guys from out of state. Guys might get homesick. Guys might decide that, when they get to campus, spend a couple of years there, they're ready for the next chapter. I mean, there's so many different factors that could go into a decision to transfer, which, by the way, that's something that makes me a little bit frustrated with fans. I get being disappointed in guys wanting to leave, but you have no idea what's happening behind the scenes. And I think I get it. Like it's there in the word fanatic. We're not dealing with rational people for the most part, but just have a little bit of grace for some 18 to 22-year-olds like making life decisions. I think there's so much pressure on these kids, more so now. They're under a microscope. There's so much media attention, so many opportunities as far as monetary that weren't there when I was there. I mean, there's just, and I don't understand looking at all of that and just getting pissed and some of the comments that I see under guys deciding to enter the portal. Sorry to get off on that tangent there. That's my rant for this, but yeah, with Walter Nolan, like, elite recruits, you're going to have to recruit them constantly and re-recruit them. So that's just kind of part of the game, as it were, especially if a coach moves on at their position.
Yeah, I think fans lack perspective in this because a lot of the Texas A&M alumni group and student population grew up wanting to go to A&M. Like that's what they wanted to do. Like their dad was an Aggie, their mom was an Aggie, their grandpa, whoever, like they liked that, like they grew up with that fan base. And so like they can't imagine leaving it for somewhere else. This is a job. And as soon as you start looking at it that way, then it becomes obvious what is happening. I love Dave Campbell's Texas football. I have enjoyed everything that they've given to me, the best job I've had to date. If somebody else calls with more money or better benefits or a bigger role or whatever that is, like I'd be dumb not to look into it. And that has nothing to do with my like or dislike of Dave Campbell's Texas football. That's just what we all do with our career all the time. And we never hold ourselves to the same standard that we try to hold these college players to. And Walter Nolan did not grow up wanting to be an Aggie. He did not have 12th man gear in his room. He did not go to a bunch of games. He came here to play football, to make money, and to go get drafted into the NFL. And if he feels like he can do a couple of those things better somewhere else, or if he's got a girlfriend somewhere or a kid or a mom. Like you said, you never know why somebody is trying to get into the portal, and he may end up back at A&M. If Coach Spencer and him hit it off and it works out that way. So yeah, I'm with you. I think fans kind of show their ass a little bit sometimes with this kind of stuff. And then they wonder why there's no loyalty. And it's like, well, y'all don't have any either. Y'all are bashing this dude. The second he makes a decision that doesn't line up with what you want, you weren't loyal either. You just liked him because he went to A&M. And so, or Texas or USC or whatever your choice of school is. It's not just an Aggie thing. It happens at every single program. UTSA lost their best player to the portal today, and I've seen it from the UTSA fan base, right? So it's not just a 12th man thing, but it is a very, I don't know, ownership-y way to look at this stuff. Like you kind of, you don't, this is not 1984 anymore. Portal wise, you got a couple names. I think Connor Wegman, we talked about obviously as one you got to keep around. Does anybody jump out to you as like priority 1B, 1C of like, we got to keep this dude in the program?
Yeah, I think Wegman is definitely one of them. I think you'd like to keep Evan Stewart around if possible. Especially with Anaya Smith moving on. From a defensive standpoint, obviously you want to keep the core of that front seven together if you can. So you'd like to keep Walter Nolan, but there's a lot of talent there as well. A guy in Torian York is a true freshman and obviously is played extremely well this year. I think he's going to be the core of that defense going forward. So that's somebody you want to keep. And again, bringing all this up, we're not saying that these guys are rumored or even likely to enter the portal. We're just saying that like you're going to have to re-recruit your guys constantly, and these are guys that are going to be key pieces moving forward.
Who do you see?
I think Jacoby Matthews at safety is one that I think you want to keep a close eye on as well.
Bryce Anderson feels like one as well, just like keeping around some leaders, who've played a lot, who kind of can bring in some of the new guys and be like, here's what we do here, here's how we do it, here's where the food hall is, here's where class, that kind of stuff. He seems like one of those guys on the defensive side of the ball. Just off of kind of what we know is in the portal now or what is being lost, what are a couple positions you think A&M will attack in the portal?
I think offensive line is going to be a spot that A&M clearly attacks, and you lose probably your best offensive lineman, Layden Robinson. He's accepted a Senior Bowl invite, and a position group that it was a place of struggle during the 2023 season. So that's something you want to address right there. I think corner is probably another position that A&M is going to want to address. Obviously, things may change, and there's still some guys that could develop. But Deuce Harmon is a guy that I think could still develop pretty highly. But that's another position you want to get to. Those two positions. Defensive line, you always need depth on the trenches on both sides. I already talked about offensive line, but defensive line, you're going to want depth there as well. And then linebacker depth too, right? Like, I think A&M got pretty lucky with Russell and York and Cooper staying healthy all year.
Yeah,
because we talked about
lucky that York was that ready.
Yeah, also 100% true. So I think linebacker could be another position that A&M goes and looks to address the portal. And I also think Mike Elko is going to be a little bit more active in the portal than his predecessor was. So those are the positions I'm keeping an eye on. To be fair, I named just about most of the field, but in this age when you're trying to maintain depth and keep your roster adequate on both sides of the ball, you're going to have to go just about everywhere in the portal.
Yeah, offensive line, cornerback feel like the two big ones. Edge rusher, I think, is another one that I would try to look at there. A&M's got really good defensive linemen. I don't know if they have a feared pass rusher. UTSA's Trey Moore just jumped into the portal. He had, I think, 10 plus sacks this last year, over 14 tackles for loss, led the state in sacks and tackles for loss. So he's one that I would look at for A&M and the Longhorns, by the way. He's going to be a hot commodity there on the transfer portal trail. Third down here, we'll talk about the bowl game. Texas A&M is playing Oklahoma State on December 27th. That's a Wednesday at 8 p.m. in the Texas Bowl at NRG Stadium. It will air on ESPN. Jay, 1 to 10. What's your excitement level for a Texas Bowl against Mike Gundy?
It's a selfish 8 because I can go to the game because it's in Houston. And as far as the actual game itself, yeah, it's I mean, look, there has not been a more enigmatic team than Oklahoma State in 2023. Early in the season, losing 33-7 to South Alabama, losing to Iowa State in a close one, and then all of a sudden they beat OU in Bedlam in the final Bedlam game, and then they go to UCF and they lose 45-3 on the road. So I don't know what version of Oklahoma State we're going to get, to be fair. We also I don't know who's going to be coaching A&M in the bowl game.
That was question number 3. Who in the hell coaches Texas A&M in this bowl game?
Again, I'm available. I'm here in Houston.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think Elijah's going to try to do some of both, maybe even both. You know, like I do think that is the plan right now, but who knows if he gets into that seat and it's like I can't do that.
Yeah, and I have no idea, just because I mean this process is changing from when I was at A&M, with coaches and how things shake out. We'll see. I mean, I'm sure we'll get updates on that as it happens, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he hangs around, but there's only so much you can do, right? And you know, it'll be interesting to see how it works. In the bowl practices in general, I mean, you're gonna have like assistants and GAs and analysts running a lot of those practices anyway, because your position coaches and your coordinators and your head guy tend to be on the road on the recruiting trails pretty hard here during the bowl practices. So it'll be interesting to just kind of see how all that stuff works out. Again, there's so many moving parts now. Like I'm with you. I don't understand why we do silly season during the season, why we can't wait. But that's the way the rules are now with the portal and with the early signing period. So you make the most of what you can do.
In an ideal world, they just make a rule that says you can't move on from a head coach until after your final game. And if that's a bowl game, that is after your final game. And then everybody's on kind of this even playing field, or just make it the day after the national championship game. That way nobody is figured it out. It's just recruiting, right? Is the recruiting thing that keeps that from happening because of the spring semester and the transfer portal and needing to get guys just to sped it all up. There is a calendar problem in college football. There is no way around it, and they have to figure out a way to fix it at some point. I've always heard coaches say, now this isn't true at, the championship, the semifinal, but for these other bowls, coaches always tell me that the bowl practices are more important to them than the bowl game. The bowl game is just a celebration. Who knows who's playing, who's not playing, what goes on there. But the bowl practices allows a lot of the young guys that maybe didn't get a ton of reps during the season, some injured guys to get some reps who are getting back healthy. You're not preparing for a game as much, and so you're able to kind of use it as a pseudo early spring practice. I wonder, as somebody who didn't play football, is that still true with the new head coach? Like, how important do you think these bowl practices are for Mike Elko and the players on this team in terms of laying a foundation for 2024?
Yeah, well, part of it is it's a great evaluation period for Mike Elko. So he may want to see some of the guys that are starters or guys that he thinks are going to be starters in practice. It's a great opportunity for him to get to see some of those faces and see how they react under pressure. But yeah, I don't, it's changed how you approach practices when you have a coaching change. Again, I still think it's going to be kind of a deal where a lot of your starters probably aren't getting as many reps. For us at A&M, when we were gearing up for the Chick-fil-A Bowl or the Liberty Bowl, it was a lot of getting guys who were very banged up, playing very banged up throughout the season, healthy.
Yeah.
So part of that is, yes, you want to get those younger guys opportunities with more reps in practice, but it's also a necessity to get some of the guys that are banged up time to rest. Because you've been going for 13, 14 weeks, and it's a brutal grind on your body. Trust me, I know firsthand.
I get it. I just did 14 straight weeks on the road as a college football writer, which I assume is pretty much the same thing. My body is taking a pounding.
Yeah, I mean, I did some road traveling myself.
Sorry, I was making a joke.
Oh. Oh man. Well, I just completely lost my train of thought.
That's how you know it's a good joke.
Oh man.
I do think that these practices are going to be like almost drill training and stuff like you said, like just trying to get a feel of who you have, who you don't have, because how much can you really install? Like the offense and defense aren't going to look any different, right? They're just going to keep doing what they've already basically been doing into the bowl game.
Yeah, this won't be an install period. It's going to be a lot of drilling, like you said, maybe fine tuning some details. It's also not going to be as physical even for the guys that
Sure.
haven't been practicing. And it's also, again, like I said, it's an opportunity for the coaches to develop some too, because you're going to have assistants running the practices and making decisions. That's one of the things that I think people don't talk about enough is this is as much an opportunity for the assistant coaches to kind of run the room. Whereas like GAs, since you're going to have your guys out recruiting, GAs will get their opportunity to lead room for a little bit. It's a growth opportunity for the whole roster and the whole staff. And I think people maybe don't always realize that. And then obviously as you get closer to the actual game, you ramp up the intensity and things start to build up there. But it's a big development period for teams. And that's why like I'm kind of interested with the coaching change, how that's going to shake out as far as guys hanging around and the lower level coaches and staffers, how that's going to work for them.
I've always wanted a new coaching staff to come in and then just like run the swinging gate in the bowl, like just do something just completely ridiculous as their base offense, just knowing that they just have a couple weeks, let's go have fun. And like, this doesn't matter for anything. But football is just way too serious for people. Like they just take it way too seriously, even in bowl games. To do that, like I would just go 5 wide, like I would just make it just a completely different thing than you would do. No, let the defensive coordinator be the offensive coordinator, let the offensive coordinator be the defensive coordinator for a day, stuff like that. That's how I would do these bowl games to make them more fun. Like I would tune in if I was watching Ohio State's bowl game and I knew that Ryan Day had to call the defense and the defense coordinator had to call the offense. Like that would be fun. Who knows? Iowa would score more points, maybe, if they allowed their defensive coordinator to score more points or to call plays. So that would be cool. We need to, on one of these episodes, we need to figure out a way to jazz up bowl season again, right? It's lost all of its luster. Nobody cares, right? Like we're fans that don't want an extra game of football unless it like has a national championship trophy on the line. You and I need to come together and figure out how we fix bowl season for everyone else. Because even after the 12-team playoff, there's still going to be another 120. Well, how many teams? There's 133 teams in college football. Just get this out of the way now. 90% of them still don't have a chance to make the 12-team playoff, right? And even if they do, 98% of them don't have a chance to win a national championship game. So we need to figure out a way to make bowls fun again. Make bowls great again is what we need to do. Let's move down to fourth down and Ask Jay segment here. Before we get to a fan question or two, I wanted to ask you just your overall thoughts on the college football playoff selection, the semifinals. For those who don't know, Texas is going to play Washington in the Sugar Bowl in the 2-3 situation there. And then Michigan gets to go to the Rose Bowl. And as the number 1 seed, their reward for that is Nick Saban in Alabama.
Yeah. So the first thought is, well, I think Florida State should have been in. I think Florida State got hosed. I think that Florida State probably would have lost to the 4 teams that made the playoff. Yes.
Yeah.
Especially without Jordan Travis. But I don't see how you can look at a Florida State team that went undefeated, won their conference in a Power 5 conference. Granted, say what you want about the ACC and the level of competition. They went undefeated and won their Power 5 conference. They had a non-conference win over LSU
and Florida,
and Florida. So they beat 2 SEC teams. I don't understand how you could look at that. They did everything within their power to make a playoff, and they got left out because the playoff committee decided that they wanted to put Florida State in.
I understand.
They wanted to put Alabama in.
I would understand using the quarterback injury if it was a tiebreaker situation. If you had 2 12-1 teams and you only had 1 spot left, and let's say it was Florida, or let's say it was Michigan, Washington, and Florida State, just the undefeated Power 5 teams, they were in, and now you're arguing the 4th spot, and it's Texas versus Alabama. And Quinn Ewers breaks his leg in the 4th quarter of the win over Oklahoma State. I would absolutely understand picking Alabama in that situation because they're fully healthy. Sure, Texas beat them, but Quinn Ewers isn't there. Alabama's going to get it. But this wasn't a tie. This wasn't a tie break. Like, Florida State is an undefeated Power 5 champion. Like, they are not from the MAC. Like, they played in the ACC. They beat Florida with that backup quarterback, and then they beat a top 20 team in their conference championship game with their 3rd-string quarterback. I am with you. I think the committee did get the best 4 teams, and if that had always been the criteria in the 10 years previous, I would have no problem with it. But it wasn't. It was never the best 4 teams. It was always the most deserving teams. And then the one year in which they were worried that they leave the SEC champion out, they changed the criteria. And I think that's the problem here is the committee looked at it and thought, without the SEC champion or without a team from the SEC in it, it is not a legitimate tournament. But leaving out Florida State made it not a legitimate tournament because they're going to claim a separate national championship if they win their bowl game. Like, if Florida State wins their bowl game and is 14-0, they are going to claim a split national championship, and they will have a claim to it in a way that Alabama would not. Like, if you leave out Alabama and they beat the crap out of somebody in their bowl game, you won't have people in 20 years talking about how that Alabama team got left out. They needed a 4th and 31 miracle 9 days ago to beat freaking Auburn a week after Auburn lost to New Mexico State. This is not some kind of like gangbusters Alabama team that you couldn't tell the story of 2023 without. The committee got scared. The committee looked around and got scared that the SEC wasn't going to be around, and they remembered TCU getting their brains kicked in, and they didn't want a semifinal that was 65-7, and they cowered to Nick Saban and the big bad SEC.
Yep. Yeah, you pretty much summed it up perfectly there. And my thing too is, like, I feel so bad for the Florida State players. That defense was incredible all year. I mean, they shut down Jaden Daniels early in the year, and man, if
Georgia had lost their quarterback, they would have still been in. If Alabama lost their quarterback, they'd still be in because the committee would go, well, they win with defense. It's Georgia. It's Alabama. They play tough, hard-nosed defense. Well, Florida State was 2nd in stop rate behind Iowa in the country, and they're 13-0. Like, you can't. Football is not this is not figure skating. This is not like, he got a 9.2 and this person gets an 8.8. They thought Washington was going to get killed by Oregon. It's just, you cannot use Vegas lines as a way to pick a playoff, or it's just an invitational, which I guess it's always been. And I don't know why I'm so mad about this.
Yeah. And the other piece of this is, I think if Georgia beats Alabama, then Florida State's in. I think that
yes,
like,
Georgia made it hard.
Yeah. So it's just frustrating because I can't help but put myself in those players' shoes. And if I go undefeated and win my conference and beat 2 SEC teams and do everything that, like, if you looked at this schedule and saw that and you say, oh, no, yeah, Florida State's a playoff team, no doubt. But they get left out just because, like you said, the committee was scared of the SEC and bowed and they kissed the ring. So I'm an SEC guy. Like, I think the SEC is the best conference in college football. I don't think there's any debate on that.
I do too, by the way.
But it's just,
this year it didn't work out.
I can't justify it, especially with just how much the committee has changed the rules they play by every year. I mean, that's a piece of this too, is the committee has just never been consistent on the formula. They change the formula based on what they want to see, and it's just it's been incredibly frustrating. I'm struggling to come to grips with it because I think that Florida State should be in, and I'm gutted for them. I honestly, like, I hope they blow out Georgia in their bowl game. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Georgia wins that game, but I hope Florida State blows out Georgia in their bowl game and just plaster that banner up everywhere. Because they'll deserve to hang that banner. Because you're telling me, like, a team that beat LSU, Florida, and Georgia goes undefeated, wins their conference, doesn't deserve to be called a national champion.
And Clemson and Miami and a ranked Duke team. Like what are we doing here? Like, I went to UTSA. They're not playing the American schedule. They didn't beat Rice, UTSA, Tulane, SMU, or whatever. Like, they beat Duke, Clemson, LSU, Florida, Louisville. Like, what are we what's happening here? That said, all of that said, Michigan, Alabama is going to be a banger, bro. Like,
yeah.
Like, that's going to be,
about that game.
If you turn the page over, like, okay, that was shitty and that's awful, and like they got jobbed. If you turn that page, right, and then you go, okay, I'm just going to look at the 14 playoff. This could be the best year of the 14 playoff. Like, there is not, I could, for the first time, I believe, make an argument that any of the 4 teams involved could win. I cover TCU a lot. I knew for a fact they could win last year. Like, I made more money on the TCU Georgia line than I've ever made on a college football game ever in my life, because it was just like so obvious, right? Yeah. Like, this year, who is the squeaky wheel?
Yeah, and you don't see one, and
I don't think there is one.
I also, like, there's storylines, right? Like Alabama, Michigan, obviously, like 2 incredible brands. You have Washington and Texas playing in a rematch from the bowl game from last year.
Yeah.
I already made my Remember the Alamo Bowl joke, but it's going to be a fun one throughout. You have so many incredible athletes and players. I worry about Texas with Xavier Worthy and that injury. But like Penix Jr., Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe in this back half of the season. I mean, there's just so much. Blake Corum at Michigan. Like, I look at all these rosters, and man, I'm still mad about Florida State, but how can I not be excited about this? This is like in UFC when like somebody jumps to the front of the line that shouldn't because they talk their way into a title shot. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, John Jones has been sitting out for 3 years, but I'm getting to see John Jones fight for a title. So
that is Alabama.
Really gonna be that mad?
That absolutely is Alabama. They are like the John Jones of this sport. Whereas, like, I don't know, man, maybe they don't deserve it, but like, god dang, they're really good and they're always winning. Nick Saban is, I mean, the GOAT, right? I mean, like, there's no, like, to get this team, like, we were both in Kyle Field to watch this Alabama team. Like, this is not one of the better Alabama teams of the last 10 to 15 years. And here they are 12-1 with a win over Georgia, just sitting there, which that line opened up as Michigan -2.5. And buddy, it will not be that for very long. So if you're on the Alabama side, hurry up before the Crimson Tide are favored. As soon as I saw that, I like stopped a podcast that I was doing with Republic of Football and like had to go place a bet because like that line was going to move immediately. I don't know who said that. That was absurd. Give me Alabama in that. Give me Texas in the Sugar Bowl as well. I do think this for Texas, though. Washington is the worst matchup of any of the teams in the playoff against Texas. And this is going to sound absurd, but Texas has finally built a roster to where the physicality thing doesn't mess with the Longhorns. You're not going to push around Devondre Sweat. You're not going to push around Byron Murphy. Kelvin Banks is maybe the best left tackle in football. Like, they're going to be fine in the trenches. What Texas struggles with is guarding receivers down the field with their safeties. And Washington's receivers are effing good. And their offensive coordinator knows how to scheme stuff up. The first quarter of Texas-Washington is going to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Like, Grubb script, Sark script, let's go. Like, let's figure out what this is. I think that is going to be the most fun game. It is like a modern military, like helicopter, like airplane fight, like a Top Gun fight. Whereas Alabama, Michigan is like trench warfare from 1945. Like that thing is going to be brutal. And I think the winner of Texas, Washington has an advantage in the national championship game because whoever comes out of Michigan, Alabama is not going to feel good. Whereas I think whoever comes out of Texas, Washington is going to win a high scoring, fun football game. But like, there's going to be beaten up and bruised people on the other side of the ball. I think the Sugar Bowl is the de facto national championship game. I think whoever wins that game between Texas and Washington wins the national championship. That's my hot take.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can see it too, especially with the physicality. Like, you talk about teams coming off playing the academies, a similar thing where like the week after, you're going to be banged up.
It's going to be a bloodbath, dude. John Harbaugh, Nick Saban, like that thing, they're a whole month to prepare. Like, that thing's going to be like, I mean, that's going to be brutal. That's a legit war game.
Yeah, and it's But again, like you said, like as mad as we are about Florida State being left out, how can you not be excited about this level of competition? Yeah. Oh man, there's so much fun going on there, and the coaches as well. Like you talked about game planning, giving them time to look at the rosters and come up with a script. I mean, there's so many good play callers all around this thing. Honestly, like if I had to pick a weakest link, as far as the coaching aspect of things, I'd probably go Michigan, right? Like,
and I do not disagree with that. I think John Harbaugh, I would rank 4th as a head coach in this thing right now, and that's absurd. I know he has Steve Sarkisian and DeBoer haven't done enough maybe to warrant that, but if I had to pick a coach to coach one of these games, I think I would pick Harbaugh 4th, just from what we've seen from him in these situations.
Which is wild to say, but I don't disagree with you. So
DeBoer's a star, dude. What he does on 4th, like the guy has no conscience. Like I would love to check his blood pressure during some of those 4th down calls. Like he didn't even think about it. And I love that stuff, man. He's a superstar. Going to be a lot of fun. That one's going to be a lot of fun. Next up, we at Robert Hewen asked, "What is the best part of going to a bowl game from a player's perspective?"
Per diem.
You can't say mayonnaise. Yeah, per diem. That's correct. You think that's as true in the NIL world?
Probably not anymore.
Now it's like, man, what is this? This is crumbs. I can't even buy.
The per diem probably doesn't play as much of a factor with NIL now. That's so. I'm sure people out there know what per diem is, but if you don't, for the bowl games, you used to get a little bit of extra money,
a little cash.
Just a little cash for going to a bowl game. You get some bowl gifts, which are really cool. I got a couple watches that I lost almost immediately after receiving them. I think the Chick-fil-A Bowl gave us a Fossil watch. I don't know where that is. I think we got a Bulova watch from the Liberty Bowl. Don't know where that is. If you find them, return to me years after. I mean, those are long gone.
Right.
But no, I mean, like getting to actually spend time and see, because I like traveling. But with like the regular season, you don't spend any time outside of the hotel unless you're going to like a team movie or something like that. So for me, the best part of the bowl game was basically getting a paid trip to go somewhere and you actually get to experience it. Like we had some fun in Atlanta, spent some time there. I couldn't eat Chick-fil-A for a week after, or for probably 6 months after, because we had so much Chick-fil-A while we were there. That was kind of a rough one. For the Liberty Bowl, I got to experience Beale Street. We'll never go back there.
You don't need to go back.
But it was cool to go to Memphis and see Memphis, get some barbecue there.
Should I go to Graceland?
Some people did. I decided not to take that trip. I think I may have been that may have been post Beale Street. So there are curfews for reference, and you do have to be back to the hotel before curfew. But I never had a problem with that. Actually, one of the funny stories is when we played in the Chick-fil-A Bowl in 2013. Our curfew was, I think, midnight, and we went to Hooters on Peachtree Street, not far from the hotel, to watch a UFC fight. It was Anderson Silva, Chris Weidman 2, and I remember sitting there watching that fight, and literally we saw Anderson Silva break his leg, and then we had to like run back to the hotel to make it before curfew, because the fights went on so late, and we're running in downtown Atlanta in a rainstorm, trying to make sure that we get back before that curfew ends. Dude, like just like things like that you don't really experience on normal road trips as a college athlete. That was a lot of fun.
And then lastly, with the A&M Aggies playing in the Texas Bowl there in your backyard in Houston, I was curious, what are 2 or 3 places you would send a 12th man faithful member here to the bowl game in Houston to eat?
Yeah. So our good fan, Marco Regalado, sent us to a great Mexican restaurant that we had. Candente
that was really good.
Kind of become one of my like go-to spots now. So if you're looking for a Tex-Mex spot, great place. I plenty of barbecue spots, and I don't want to like pick just one. So depending on what part of town you're in, like if you're up in the Montgomery area, go to Bar A Barbecue. If you're staying in the Heights, Truth Barbecue or Pinkertons. If you're kind of west of town, Spring Branch area, Feegis Barbecue is great. If you're down by Pearland, go to Killen's, Blood Brothers in Bel Air. That's again, I don't want to pick out a single barbecue spot, so that's my barbecue spiel. And then make sure you try some of the really good Vietnamese food while you're here in Houston. Sin Chow is a good spot. I mean, you can just go down to the Mahatma Gandhi district in Houston and get some incredible Indian food. There's so many spots out here. Himalaya is a great restaurant for Indian food. Make sure you try out some of the different cuisines that Houston has to offer, because there's some great stuff. If you're into Chinese food, like actual Chinese food, go to Mala Sichuan Bistro. It is a fantastic Chinese food spot. So that's the one problem that I've learned with Houston is there's too much good food. So I know I gave more than 2 or 3 on that answer. I cheated a little bit, but with a city as diverse as Houston, I felt like I had to give a few options.
Yeah, it's tough to beat. I mean, I think it is unquestionably the best food city in the state. I mean, I love Austin, but Houston's got to beat there. All righty, man. I think that will do it for this episode of the Aggie War Pod. Please rate, subscribe, leave a review. Those reviews help us a lot. I mean, only if it's a good one. If you're listening still to this one, I'd hope it'd be a good review, or you've wasted a decent amount of your time here on something that you don't like. So
hate listens.
Yeah, hate listens, which is fine. Just hate download, but don't hate review is all we're saying. Don't be a hater. We're trying our best here. For Jay Arnold, Mike Craven, for Dave Campbell's and the Republic of Football, we will see you probably in a week or two. We'll figure out kind of as the news comes down if we need one for next week. If not one, we'll get one before Christmas and definitely before the bowl game. Please send us any questions online, Twitter to Jay Arnold for the Ask Jay segment, and we will talk to you next time.